The secret sauce is understanding this growing need for what I call the hospitality hyphenate, and really helping folks figure out how to put together a hyphenate life that allows them to find sustainability in their work, not have to fully walk away from hospitality, and also be creative and live a healthy life, right? It's a blueprint rather than just a path that anybody can sort of lay over their work. How do you figure out the revenue so that you can keep your day job? You don't have to take away from the job, but you want to do a good job. You want to show up and do solid work, but also what's filling up your cup. We're so creative in this industry. We have to be, because it's a survival tactic. The hyphenate is taking place because it's a canvas approach to the career. It's a portfolio approach to the career.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Perfect Bite podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Perkins. It may be more important now than ever for us to know where we can find a sense of community. Folks that welcome us with open arms, understand our perspectives, and want to help push each other forward. I'm happy to say that today's guest is an expert in building community and providing frameworks for those in the hospitality space. With her own experience as a sommelier turned restaurateur turned consultant, she's able to work with others building their own dreams from the ground up and fuel them with the right resources and connections. Please welcome founder of Aldea Hospitality, Liz Mendez. Liz.
Thank you for having me. Really excited to be here, Sarah.
I'm so happy to see you. Again, you and I met only like 2 months ago, but it was kind of like a little bit of love at first sight, we were like...
And serendipitous for sure. Like, we were definitely destined to meet for sure.
Yes, I know. And it's so nice because even though I live out of Chicago now, I just like feel the sense of home and the kind of community that you're building every time I'm back there, or even, hundreds of miles away, I can still have these conversations. I've felt it with women and other folks too that I've met in California and New York. So it's just all about finding the right people.
Absolutely. In Chicago, I mean, in true Midwestern style, we welcome everybody in for sure.
Definitely. Well, I always like to start all the way back at the beginning as much as we can here. So I love to hear, when did you first fall in love with food, and what was eating and cooking like in your household growing up?
So I am at the heart of Gen X. I was also born and raised in the Midwest, and I am the granddaughter of 2 farming families. So I really grew up a mix of home cooking and then, in good Gen X style, some frozen pizzas and boxed mac and cheese, and so my connection to food really comes through my maternal grandparents. They were instrumental in raising me, and a lot of old school values about, Sunday dinners and just around food in general and how special it was. And so that is where a lot of my memories come from. And, when you say, what's the first food you fell in love with, that is hard to remember, but not shocking. As someone who has spent a career in beverage, I do remember the first beverage I fell in love with. So it was tea, and it was specifically iced tea at the time. And so one of the things that I remember growing up is that my grandparents, especially in the summer, always had iced tea brewed. That was definitely a time where folks still came over for the visit, right? And you popped by and you had iced tea or lemonade. Or something refreshing, something to extend hospitality long before we used that word the way that we do today, right? That word has gone through quite a transition in the zeitgeist over the last 20, 30 years. So they always had iced tea in the house. But my real first memory of falling in love with tea and iced tea in general was when I could sugar and sweeten the tea myself, right? Like, I was tall enough at the counter where I could reach. My grandparents had this little counter cubby between the refrigerator and the stove. And of course, it had the coffee and the tea there, but it also had the classic sugar caddy, the glass bowl with the little spoon. And the memory is of my cousin, who's 4 years older than me, really teaching me how to sugar my iced tea, right? Because in the
Mm.
Midwest, we don't sweeten our tea.
Right. We're not Southern. Right.
No, we're not sweet tea in the
It's like an
Midwest.
Arnold Palmer at the most, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And so by default, it's not sweetened and you sweeten as necessary. And so there is this moment where I really remember her showing me, you scoop with the little spoon and you've got the
Yeah.
long teaspoon to stir and all
Special
these
sugar
things.
spoon
Yeah, for sure.
and
And
the
so
ritual.
for sure,
And you were
ritual.
like, I get to be part of the big girl rituals now.
Oh, for sure. And probably annoying her to no end, right? Because
Yeah.
of course she's 4 years older than me, and it's like, oh, here's my annoying cousin wanting to learn how to like sweeten the tea. But I do really remember taking a drink of that tea and it being bitter and refreshing and sweet
Yes.
sort of all at once. And it's a memory that I will have with me forever. And that's where I fell in love with tea long before I fell in love with wine.
I love like I know we're called the perfect bite, but again, this is food and bev. And you telling that story made me think about two beverage memories myself as a kid. Like outside of loving some country time lemonade or whatever was mixed up at home, tea specifically, I lived just north of the city of Chicago. So falling in love with Chicago was getting the chance to go downtown. And it was very sweet. My dad and I loved to do tea time at the Drake. Still a very good tradition today. But it's like, it
Yeah.
was kind of like our daddy daughter time was, having some good high tea. And it's how I fell in love with like just even the scent of jasmine,
Yeah. There's
my
so
favorite
many,
tea. And I'm
so
like,
many
it's now my
aromatics.
favorite perfume. It's now my favorite, like anything jasmine is associated with that. So
Yeah.
thank you for sparking that because it's our taste buds and our senses in just a different way.
Yeah, and also, I mean, if a sommelier doesn't bring a beverage memory, like what good am I?
What was your moment that you said not only is hospitality for you, but why you wanted to specifically go into it, focusing on wine and being a sommelier versus anything more focused on beverage than you were focused on, say, food or food pairings?
Yeah, I started working in restaurants when I was in high school, and we had a rule in my family. It was like, if you are not playing sports, then you're working. I feel like that's also a very Midwestern thing
Yes.
growing up.
Or both.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so we did not grow up with wine at the table. And so I also have a lot of friends that grew up in the Midwest and it was the same, right? It
Yeah,
was,
we were pretty dry as a household.
yeah, same.
Yeah.
But I started working in restaurants in high school, and what I found was a real freedom with making your own money, and really found my connection to the sort of music lineage. I have a lot of music background. My dad is a musician, and a lot of people in my family played instruments and whatnot. And so I was working in restaurants, really sort of figuring out where I was fitting in with sort of the art and music scene as I was growing up. And it was interesting because it wasn't until I got into college and I was actually working in Chicago while going to school at DePaul University, where we also, of course, have a connection. We both have
Yes. Little Blue
educational
Devils
ties.
moment.
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely. And I started working on Rush Street. I started working at a restaurant on Rush Street. And this is before Chicago looked like it does now. Like you didn't really have a lot of options when you wanted to go out for like sort of upscale dinner that wasn't fine dining. And what I saw is the folks that were selling wine were like doubling their money at the end of the night. And I was paying for a very expensive education. And I was like, maybe I should go learn about wine. And so a
Right.
lot of it was educational, but it also ties back to, my grandparents were very into service. My grandmother was in customer service for a long time. She worked in the jewelry industry, so a lot of hospitality there, but they were always hosting as well. So there was this hospitality aspect of like service to others that I really sort of clicked into with the wine side of things. I'm like, there's something here. My grandfather was really into geography as well. And so there were a lot of things that were really checking the boxes of things that I had grown up with that it fit, but also like, okay, let's go bump up the check average because I know some things about wine. So at the time, the real focus of my education there was specialized in California and Italian, which
Okay.
was very common in the industry across the board, right? Like you worked in steakhouses, which a lot of my history until I got into sort of Spain and Central and South America was steakhouses. And that was what was on the list. And you saw that across the country, both in steakhouses and others, where California and Italy really ruled the wine list for a long time back in the day in a lot of
Yes.
places.
Yes. When did you start to have that itch to explore other regions? I love how you brought in your family's connection as well, because when I'm thinking wine, I also think agricultural sciences. So when you're coming from a farming background, either you talk about it a lot in farming families or you just don't.
Absolutely. And so both of my grandparents had moved off the farm. So we were a little bit removed from like everyday farming, but there was a pull towards that in understanding that agricultural aspect and that it was an agricultural product. And so it wasn't until I had graduated college, I was working in radio and was still bartending on the side. And again, I can always come back to this. I know that we've talked about this offline a little bit, but I am, what is more known now as like a creative hyphenate. I've definitely done a lot of things alongside my career in both wine and restaurants, but I didn't get into Spain and then Central and South America until I started working at Carnival in 2005.
Classic
Um,
carnival.
Carnival was a behemoth, and it was really my opportunity to step into true leadership for the first time in the restaurant industry. And I absolutely fell in love with the wines from Central South America. And then, of course, Spain too, which, my roadmap definitely led
Yes.
me to that as well. So it was working at Carnival that allowed me to take my knowledge of California and Italian wine and expand it. It was also a time in the industry where us as peers, we were all sort of educating each other, right? Like someone could be your mentor that was maybe a little bit younger than you or your age or only a little bit older, where we were all educating one another. And it was definitely a grand time to be a part of the wine world. And yeah, that door that opened working at Carnival to Spain would change my life.
I want to hear how. And I want to get there after asking just a little bit more around this. I think a lot of folks out there are like, I'm a wine person. Like, how hard could it really be to become a sommelier? I always say, I'm like, I am not a wine expert. I just know, like, do I think it tastes good? Do I don't think it tastes good? And so I'd love for you to go into what it really takes to get that type of certification. And also, you mentioned to me too, this was still a time, I think we can argue even still today, there's just still so little diversity in terms of folks who are represented in the wine industry. So, as a woman, too, how were you feeling during that time becoming a wine expert and how others were seeing you?
So I got serious about my wine career at Carnival, as I said. And at that time, there was this boom with particularly the Court of Master Sommeliers. And that would be a curriculum for my own education and mentoring and teaching for about 10 years. I have mad respect for anyone who goes through the Court of Master Sommeliers or the WSET, which obviously leads to eventual Master of Wine. Like looking back, I probably should have done WSET because I'm a writer and that is really built for writing. But it takes an enormous amount of time and resources to get any level of certification, even if you're just taking the intro, right? Because you do have to familiarize yourself with a ton of wine, a ton of different styles of wine. You also have to build relationships with folks in the industry, and all of that takes resources. And when I was coming up, and this is definitely something I think we should be talking more about, is that there were only a few seats at the table for any kind of diversification in the industry. And, you know, I look back and say, I probably could have done some things better. And that's something that is a big part of my work now at Aldea is how can I choose better and build community in a more sustainable and equitable way than I did when I owned my restaurant. When some of it was out of ignorance and some of it was out of fear. When we have access and opportunity, as we see when people don't speak up and use their voice and platforms, a lot of times they don't because they don't want to lose those opportunities. And so it definitely was a time of growth for the wine industry, right? And it was becoming this legitimate thing where you definitely saw a lot of people saying they were certified sommeliers. A lot of us were not wearing our pins on the floor at that time, but of course, we saw like the new generation ushered in of like the younger millennials. They were wearing their pins
Oh,
on the
like
floor, and yeah, they were,
proudly.
yeah, and good for them. Like every industry is different. And probably about, I would say though, between 2015 and 2017, I did start to take a step back from my education in the Court of Master Sommeliers. And really, because I did see that it was gatekeeping people and it made people feel like, oh, I'm not a professional because I don't have these pins or whatever it is. And I didn't want to be a part of that. And this isn't to say that other people are gatekeeping now. There was just this feeling that if you didn't take the tests, you weren't really a sommelier. And natural wine has absolutely busted that myth now,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Which thank goodness, right? Because they democratized it a little
Yes.
bit, the natural wine movement. So definitely grateful for that.
Yes. And you mentioned too to me, like, you even had to wear your hair a certain way to be taken seriously. Like, for folks who are just listening in, like, Liz has this gorgeous curly hair that she's embracing. And my hair is like, hello, hormones. Like, my hair is also getting wavier and curlier with age. And it's just nuts to be like, well, you have to straighten your hair for anyone to take you seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was a time in the industry where a lot of my colleagues and friends, we were sort of wearing jeans and t-shirts and suit jackets and like sneakers. And
Relaxed.
you
Yeah.
combine that with curly hair and you show up at tastings, and some of the more traditional folks, especially from the higher end of restaurants, they kind of like give you the stink eye. Meanwhile, men would wear the exact same outfits and be just cherished for having this great
Considered
style.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
so cool, right? And so straighten your hair and look a certain way and play a certain part. And yeah, I don't have to subscribe to that anymore.
so nice. Yeah, like, I guess you should have been busting out your Chanel tweed suit
Exactly.
with your pearls. I mean, you saw, like, both sides happening with the industry. You saw many different angles of it, for better and for worse. As you mentioned, your eyes were open to Spain, and you also, I mean, you met your partner in all ways of life, Chef Mark Mendez, beautiful chef. I want to hear a little bit about the meet cute, how you guys fell in love. I mean, I always love a meet cute on here because I think founder partnerships that are also romantic, like, you're kind of like, oh, our whole lives are in this together. We have to make something work. So curious how you met, and then also why you two decided, like, this is our time to start Vera, the wine bar and restaurant that you had.
So we met at work. We met at
Yeah.
Carnival. I make a joke constantly anytime somebody tells me they're like dating somebody they work with. I'm like, highly don't recommend it. Like,
I met my man through my work too.
I mean,
What you can you do if you like to work? Like, where what are you
and
gonna do? Meet them on an app? No.
right.
People
First of
people
all, there were no
actually
apps back
I
then,
know, exactly. Now I have friends who literally have met wonderful husbands, like, on their apps, but,
which
like,
is great,
yeah.
which is great. But before we had these supercomputers tied to our hands where we were reachable at all times on email and whatnot, there really was in what we'll call corporate work, or what my friend likes to call day walker work. You really were separated from sort of your job. And in the industry, we were not. It was especially in the like late 90s and early aughts, like the industry was your life.
all the
You were
time.
working, and then when you got off work, you were going out and you were hanging with other people that were in the industry, and everybody was sort of dating everybody. And it was just like this whole big thing. So when I started working at Carnival, Mark was already the executive chef. And we were already working very closely together because of the food and the wine and the beverage and operation. So we were working very closely together, and found out that we both loved food and wine. We're both big Bears fans. Like, I grew up with the Bears. He's born and raised Chicago. So,
Thank
it
you.
was
You
like,
guys were like, oh yeah, the Bears.
let's go out and watch the Bears. And, the rest is history. But it was at Carnival where we had two aha moments. The first was doing wine dinners that we capped at 50. We always capped our
Nice.
wine dinners at Carnival at 50. We felt like it was a great intimate sort of number of folks where things don't get too out of hand. Everybody gets to have a great time. It's also not as tough to execute, right? When you start to get into wine dinners that are over 50, you're definitely talking about a lot more bottles, a lot more food, and things like that.
People
And
get
so,
crazy.
yeah. And so we were doing wine dinners together, which was great and really exciting. And we were having a ton of fun. And then we were already dealing with Spanish wines. I was really learning about Rioja. And Ribera del Duero. Those were probably two of the regions that I was most focusing on when I was at Carnival. And then something happened in 2008 that was a turning point. And that was when Jamon Iberico became legal in the United States. So up until
Just so
2000,
yummy.
yeah, I mean, Jamon Iberico, Bologna is beautiful. Best ham in the world. Don't tell my Italian friends. They might get mad that I said it's the best. But
I like the prosciutto as well.
yeah, for sure. Like, your ham,
I'm Switzerland when it comes to ham.
that. But it wasn't legal in the United States. And Fermin, which is a very well-known producer now of Jamon Iberico and specifically Bologna, they were able to pass all of the rigorous and really strict protocols for ham to come to the United States, because of course Spaniards, they don't refrigerate jamon, right?
So that's
And
why
yeah,
it
and the
was just a
USDA is like,
different, yeah,
it's not safe.
but it's just different.
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very different cultures. And so became legal. We were working with some great folks that were bringing in Spanish like delicacies and really high end like olive oils and vinegar and stuff like that. And we got offered one of I think there were five hams that came to Chicago. We were one of the spots that got it. And so the gentleman who brought it in, he brings in the ham, we get it set up in the stand, and he's showing the chefs, this is how you cut it, this is what you do. Because back then we also weren't just like looking it up on YouTube, like, how do you cut hamon, right? And so he was showing us, we all try it, blown away. It's like the best ham, right? And then he asks me for glasses, and then he pulls out this half green bottle of wine, and he pours it, and it's clear, liquid, it's a white wine, right? And he slices another piece of ham, and we have this ham with this wine, and my brain broke for sure because it was Fino sherry. And I don't know if it was actually in that moment, because I mean, we're talking almost 20 years now. I can't believe Carnival's been open for 20 years, but it was just this moment where I was like, this is delicious. This is definitely aligned with what I want to do. And so when Mark and I first started talking about we wanted to open our own place and we were going to need to raise money and things like that, it was like, well, what's the concept? What's going to set us apart? What are we going to do? And it was like, we both love Spain. He is half Puerto Rican, so he's got a lot of the Moorish Spanish influence in a lot of his cooking and his background. And so we're like, it's going to be Spain, and we're going to specialize in sherry. which is absolutely
So
wild to like
different.
look back on now and think that we did that. And so that was the aha moment where we're like, let's sort of do what we do at wine dinners. We wanted to be on a small scale. And sure enough, our restaurant was 48 seats. So it definitely had that feel. We wanted it to feel a little intimate. And for a number of years, we threw a wine party 5 to 6 days a week, and it was a lot of fun.
Incredible. I mean, you were ahead of your time in so many ways. Like you're talking about the time period around when I was moving downtown Chicago or so. So that was 2013. And it took a really long time to start to see more wine bars popping up around the city. I don't know if any others were sherry focused. Like if you're thinking Spain, you're just thinking Cafe Barbariba as kind of like your comp, probably. Maybe a few other little tapas spots around town. But you all were kind of that first, the moment of tapas, but like that moment of charcuterie that we all fell in love with as well. And like that to me is the feeling of like an all day cafe or, the wine bar from Europe that I just wish was on every corner that we don't have.
It's
And
interesting.
yeah,
It's interesting that you bring that part up because we also did open for daytime cafe. Like this is a no-brainer now, right? Like you're a wine bar open for a cafe during the day.
make sure you've got coffee in the morning. Yeah. Like,
100%.
and then transition.
Well, back then it was not as popular and the West Loop and the wine industry and the restaurant industry looked very different.
Oh
But
gosh,
when
yeah.
we were yeah, right? But
It
when
was
we
like still barely like not a meat packing industry.
Yeah, for sure. Like, it's a very interesting neighborhood to have worked in for the last almost 21 years and lived in for 11 and then obviously owned a space. But when we were open at that time and we were really specialized in sherry, as well as a lot of European unique selections, we also had a good amount of Madeira, but we really started to embrace that space for a very magical moment. It was a very small moment that we were a little bit of a wine hub. There was a time when our staff, I think, had 7 sommeliers on the floor. Now, granted, they were serving, and I always say a sommelier is a super server, right? You just because you're a sommelier doesn't mean you forget how to be a server, and you should run food and seat the door and all of these things, right?
Yeah.
But it really became sort of this wine hub for, again, just a one magical moment that was really exciting where people were coming in and calling for sherry, right? We probably had somewhere in flux between like 15 to 20 by the glass and then probably like another 20 to 30 by the bottle. And so, like, people would literally walk in the door and be like, "I needed to get a glass of sherry." And, like, you never thought that people were really gonna say that. And we also focused, obviously, on Spain, but Portugal and Portuguese wine as well. Portuguese, both wine and olive oil were a big part of what we were doing. And so it's been so great to have that experience. And now, like, you walk into any type of restaurant, it does not matter what the cuisine is, you're probably going to see a Spanish or a Portuguese wine by the glass, which it's exciting to see that.
Yeah. All of those things you just described remind me of just feels like sunshine when you go into places like, were you doing the Perons?
We sure were.
So that's a party.
That is a party for sure. So we would, and let me say this, restaurant folks are great at judging. I think we judge for sport. So people would like do the Perone and we would judge, right? Like,
Right. Like, how much
what's
do
your
you
arm
think?
extension? How much did you drip? Like, what's happening? So yeah, we had a lot of fun. The things that non-restaurant folks see in our industry and they're like, oh, they just make awesome food and drink great wine all day. And it's like, that's not the case, but some of those surface level fun things we definitely got to do.
Yes. I was going to ask you, like, what were the biggest lessons in opening your own space like this, keeping it open for years, your biggest challenges, as well as those fun times? And then, and this is always hard too, but like the saying goodbye part when you decided that it was time to move on. So I'd
Yeah.
love to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah. I think there's a couple things here that I feel are really important to touch on. And it's that while we do have fun and we get to do a lot of great things, balance is almost non-existent or was non-existent back then. And it's part of the reason that we closed, right? Was like we did not have additional cash injections. And that definitely held us back. And that was also a time when the industry was changing, right? Now you've got private equity and venture capital and all kinds of different investments that are keeping the restaurant industry afloat at certain levels. And we didn't have that. And it was like, okay, we sort of need to like go take care of ourselves, right? And I do believe that it's important to say that when you close a restaurant or a bar, there is a grieving. I would never equate
The
it to the death of a loved one. I've never
big
say that, but
it's
there is
business, baby.
yeah, there's this grieving, right? Like you created this concept and now it's time to close this concept. And so it took a little while to be able to understand that we were in debt in a lot more ways than financial when we closed that restaurant, right? We were emotionally in debt and physically in debt and spiritually in debt because you give everything to this industry, you give everything to the space. And when you're married and you're in it with your partner,
Oh, you
there's
do.
no reprieve at all
No.
because you're thinking about your work and how to be successful 24/7. And so there wasn't a lot of balance back then. And I think that that is probably still very true for a lot of small independent restaurants. I think that a lot of folks go through those challenges on how to balance life and work.
I think you should be really proud no matter what. Not just because like mine was on the tech side of things, but like walking away from my own business baby was extreme. Like again, you're kind of doing that game with yourself of like, what could I have done better? Like, how could I have changed this outcome? But it's kind of like you're going to hold yourself back from whatever's really special that's coming if you stay in that space too long. So I'm also just inspired that you were able to recognize the debt that wasn't just even financial. It was like, no, as much as like it was fun on the outside or in moments, like as you said, if you're feeling spiritually indebted, you can't do that forever.
You really can't. It's not
You can't.
sustainable for
Yeah.
sure. And one of the things that Mark and I talk about is that when we closed our restaurant, we did so with our marriage still intact. And a lot of folks don't do that when they're
That's a
working
big
together.
win too. That's a
Yeah.
huge moment to be like, we reflected on this. This is what's best for us as well.
Yeah,
Like the life
absolutely.
partnership.
Yeah.
Yes.
And also, though, when we thought the door was closing, it was actually opening the door to eventually what I would do today, but also just on an opportunity to go out and educate myself even more on what was a very fast-paced changing aspect of the industry.
I want to talk about that next step. So, what were you doing in those moments of reflection post? Oh my gosh, what am I going to do now? You probably had a little bit of that panic in addition to the I get to do something different now. You were with Resi for a couple of years on the partnership side of things. So, always loves hearing some behind the scenes for restaurant tech and what you thought.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But also, I want to hear then how Aldea came to be then
Mm,
in its iteration today and why you decided to focus on coaching and consulting for hospitality clients.
yeah. So I was consulting when Vera was still open with wine associations and like beverage conferences and wine awards and stuff like that. So I was already consulting and I bristle at even using that word consultant because it does sometimes get a bad rap in the industry.
I can feel like someone's just like, hi, how
Yeah,
much can I
like
pick your
they're
pocket?
completely on fudge and they don't know what they're doing and they
Right.
mess everything up. But I was consulting for a little bit. And while I was consulting after we closed Vera, I had the opportunity to work with a Michelin star restaurant and team, which was awesome. And while I was doing all of that, I was educating myself on areas outside of food and beverage that were restaurant adjacent.
Right.
And 2017, that was the wild west for restaurant technology. I feel like it was like Toast was just coming on the scene, right? Resi was figuring out what they were doing. Reserve was really big in Chicago and Boston. So you had a lot of things happening in technology. And I had a former regular and industry colleague that was working with Resi and referred me to be a salesperson with them. And I was really excited about that because I was like, I am going to get to learn this other side of the industry that is booming right now. And it will be great from just a perspective. And so that's what I thought I was going in to learn. And I did for sure. And I got to work with operators all over the country, which was,
So cool.
yeah. And I had colleagues all over the world. Like to talk about how it expanded my network was amazing. And also, I got to learn about acquisitions, and it was really
Yeah.
interesting at that time to learn what it was like to acquire a company and be acquired. I've been on both sides now, and that was the real schooling was
That's your like,
understand.
that was your startup education. Very
Yeah,
much so.
100%.
Yeah.
And it was brutal. Like, it's hard to get a restaurant to change their glass pours, right? It's hard for a wine person to come in and be like, you should pour my Sauvignon Blanc by the glass, right? That's challenging. When you're working in technology sales, you're asking people to rip out their infrastructure, right? And so tech sales are wild. They're
Yeah.
absolutely wild, but it really fit because I had the relationships in the industry and I was able to sort of come in and be like, let's talk about using different technology. What we really found was that my skills were on the account management side because I could think and speak like an owner to other owners and sort of meet them where they're at. And so I worked in account management for a good amount of time. And then I started leading a team where we were overseeing the Midwest and everything from Philly all down the East Coast to Miami. That was a huge education. It was great to work with so many folks that had been in the industry. That was something that both Reserve and Resi did really well. They brought in industry folks that were trying to make that move from the floor where they could have a quality of life. So many people that I know, including myself, like if I could work the floor for the rest of my life, I would. Like it's in my blood, like I have it, like I've got it, right? But not so sustainable.
No,
Not
like you
always.
mentioned, and just even on the bones.
For sure, for sure. And so it was really great to understand the acquisition side and mergers. And then I got to learn from one of the best marketers in the entire world, which is American Express. Like I got to learn
Wow. Yeah.
about fantastic minds around marketing and what partnership really looks like. And that is why in my business now, I don't really say I'm a consultant, but I do talk more so about how I partner with folks in the hospitality industry. That's the word that I use more because it does need to be a partnership when we work with other folks.
Definitely. I want to hear more about that because it's so easy when you're building your own brand to be like, me. Hello, pay attention over here, break through the noise. What are you doing today with your partnership work, your consulting work, your coaching work? How are you implementing that ethos that you learned at Resi into what you're teaching folks today so that they can do better? What's kind of the secret sauce that you're presenting folks at Aldea?
For sure. So, first, the word translates in Spanish to village. When we first
Okay.
started the company, I had the tagline, it takes a village, because I definitely was the product of a village raising me. And Mark comes from a very tight knit community on the south side of Chicago. So, same thing there. And so, I always like to tell people that's the name of the agency to begin with. And it's a boutique agency that can really do end to end work with, of course, restaurants, but any hospitality folks that are out there, and also businesses that want to build relationships with on premise as well. But we have a specialization. And for me, it's obviously beverage and front of house operations. Of course, Mark is still out there chefing. So the culinary side only gets tapped when we do events or activations. But I would probably say the secret sauce is understanding this growing need for what I call the hospitality hyphenate and
Yes.
really helping folks figure out how to put together a hyphenate life that allows them to find sustainability in their work, not have to fully walk away from hospitality, and also be creative and live a healthy life, right? And so the hospitality hyphenate is probably the secret sauce that is differentiating my work right now.
Yes. And I love that phrase. So you've been building this out through your Substack. You've got these luncheon workshops. You're building community as much as possible. I mean, how are you describing being a hospitality hyphenate to folks where they can go, oh, wait, I should do that and I can do that too? Because we are in that era where, like, do you remember that very antiquated phrase, like they were moonlighting?
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
oh, like, oh, the moonlight is this as well. It's like, no, girl, everyone needs multiple revenue streams these days. Times are tough, hospitality and beyond. So I like how you're turning that on its head and saying, yeah, but here's how you get to tap into all the things you are so that you can be creative and find these different spaces. So, what are some of those spaces that you're focusing on with folks?
So I would say the first easy one is music. So many people in the hospitality industry were musicians or have found their way in and out of being a musician, but there's a lot of ways to be an artist. There's a lot of ways to be a writer. I always say, you show me a good sommelier and I'll show you a writer because sommeliers, they write all the time. They write
Very
descriptions, they write
poetry.
wine lists. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's definitely it's in them, right? But the hospitality hyphenate, first of all, it's a blueprint rather than just a path, right? That anybody can sort of lay over their work. And we just did a community call. I have a colleague in New York that I work with who definitely is my partner on this hospitality hyphenate work. And we just did a community call where we broke down where how our money breaks down. And it's like, how do you figure out the revenue so that you can keep your day job? You don't have to take away from the job. You want to do a good job, you want to show up and do solid work, but also what's filling up your cup, right? Like from a creative
Yes.
perspective, we're so creative in this industry. We have to be because it's a survival tactic
Yeah.
to be creative. But in my own hyphenate, it's the brand side, right? Which is beverage. And then it's leadership. And then it's also writing. And so many people who are in my circles are probably going to plug their ears when they hear this to have me say it again. But everyone should have a newsletter. Like, if you are in this industry at any level, you should have a newsletter because when you do have a newsletter, then you own that direct
Yes.
audience, right? And that's really, really important. As you know, we're both communications folks. So we know the power of that. You don't own your audience on social media. So if you already have a newsletter or you're relying on social media, like the biggest thing that I would tell people in being a hyphenate is you can easily start writing now while you have a job, write about what you have expertise in, what you have experience in, and then figure out how to like sort of start folding that in to shout out to Catherine O'Hara there, fold in the cheese. She did
Uh,
good. Yeah,
we folded in.
we
Just
folded it.
folded
Yes.
in.
Love to get a Schitt's Creek reference in
You
there. So,
know.
but yeah, there's a lot of ways that you can build being a hyphenate. It's what's your main income, and then what are other revenue streams, income streams that you can bring in. And you brought up the moonlighting phrase. Something that I talk a lot about
It was
is,
used like, snootily.
oh,
Or
100%.
or like, oh, you must not be giving 100% to my work if I know you're moonlighting at something else. And it's like, maybe people just to do multiple things. Or maybe they
Absolutely.
have to.
And I'm also happy that we've seen the phrase side hustles sort of like move its way out. We're not hearing that as much. And the hyphenate is taking place because it's a canvas approach to the career, right? It's a portfolio approach to the career.
It's
And
smart.
so, yeah,
Hedge those
that's
hedges. Hedge, hedge those bets against like for yourself. Clearly, I'm not a gambler.
no, neither am I. Well, I mean, you could say I was a gambler because I opened a restaurant, but
Right, exactly. Like opening
yeah.
their own businesses ever was gambling. But yeah, I don't know the phrases. But what are you doing then to get the hospitality hyphenate message out there? So, what's your storytelling that you're focused on for the Aldea brand? Like, what would you say is the storytelling secret ingredient you like to focus on to get folks' attention and build your audience here?
First of all, it's all newsletters all the time. Like I started my Substack, I think like 2.5, 3 years ago now. I have hundreds of subscribers, and I really have this perspective of let's go deep on the topics that a small amount of people care about rather than spray and pray, which is definitely
So
a
smart.
communications tactic.
It's really
And
difficult too, like to
yeah,
figure out the exact niches you have to find. I'm still doing it through this podcast and Substack. It's like, what do people want to hear?
same. And it's always going to be a work in progress, right? We're always a work in progress. But the secret sauce is, of course, understanding that hospitality hyphenate and bringing folks in. The other side of sort of the secret sauce to storytelling is I'm a recovering people pleaser. I'm also a recovering fixer. And we thrive in the restaurant industry, right? As people
Oh,
pleasers
yeah.
and
No
fixers.
boundaries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had no boundaries. I had zero boundaries when I owned a restaurant and before
Oh,
that.
yeah. I get
Um,
it. I'm still trying.
it's hard. It's hard. But as that sort of recovering people pleaser, I am using my voice more and speaking up in ways that I wished I could have and would have when I owned the restaurant. So I talk a lot about having equity be a big part of our work, both at Aldea and just when we go out into the world, right? It's like we're all humans, we're all flawed, we all make mistakes. So let's give people the grace that we want folks to show us, you know? And so more honest storytelling, more equitable, sustainable, having those kind of conversations, and really focusing on both the culture of hospitality and beverage. We don't get a lot of that storytelling in our work right now because we all know what's happening with legacy media, but also we're definitely competing for attention with anything. And so it's like, it's hard for people to write about the cultural side of things and not have it be a list or a review or something like
Right.
that. But it's working out so far.
I love that. You're kind of like a culture capturer in a lot of ways
I like that. I'm
and
like,
like
take that
reflecting
away.
it back, right? Go for it. But so when you're even talking about like your specialty of beverage, you transitioned to the non-alc side of things. You're bringing your sommelier teachings, your taste and everything to that. What is the community and storytelling that you're focusing on with that as well? Because I think it's such a beautiful growing space, but there's still a lot of like misconceptions around it.
For sure. The beverage side, this is the brand side of my work, right? I have the business side, which is culture and leadership, but the brand side of my work is beverage. And to be honest, when I walked away from the floor, I needed a break from beverage. I needed a break from wine. And I loved wine, but it wasn't really loving me back. And I think it's
Get it.
important to note here that I'm going to say the P word. When I was closing my restaurant, unbeknownst to me, because it was not something that a lot of people were talking about out in the world, I was definitely at the beginning parts of perimenopause, right? And we don't talk about that in the industry like at all.
Think about perimenopause every other day.
Right. It like you get to a certain age and it starts to consume
And
you. And part of the
I'm
reason it starts to consume you
because
is,
I'm confused when it's going to happen.
yeah, well, and it consumes you, right? It can consume you like that conversation because everything is changing. But a lot of people were not talking about that. And so wine was like the center of my career for a long time. And it was good to me in many ways, but it also came at great cost. Like it came at the cost of my health. It came at the cost of some relationships. And as much as I'll say there was like never this rock bottom of me, like I am now over 2 years alcohol free. And it was never necessarily about a rock bottom, but for anyone, you know, that's Gen X or Gen Y, as I like to call the older millennials, but for anybody in the industry that drinks, especially like us Gen Xers, we came through a time that was filled with a lot of debauchery. Like, I'm not going to shy away from saying that. And, you know, sometimes as flawed humans, we don't always make the best decisions in those situations. And those are one of the things where I'm like, let me show up better in community than I have in the past. But when I closed the restaurant, I was in my mid 40s. I was in this time where alcohol was not hitting the same, but I wasn't really realizing it yet because it was such a big part of my
It's
life.
just, yeah, it was so integrated
Yeah,
to who
it
you were
was,
as a person
yeah,
in a
it
lot
was
of
part,
ways.
it was
You were
part of
like,
my
what does
fabric.
this look like without it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But you know what doesn't pair well with fluctuating hormones? Alcohol. And so I started taking big breaks from alcohol, but as I said at the beginning of our conversation, drinking beverages has always been just such a core part of like life with my family and who I am. And so I immediately, when I was like, I'm going to take breaks, but I do need to find something to substitute. I would say that I'm a substitute drinker, right? Like it's great to have a cocktail. I want to see like the creativity and the invention of non-alcoholic cocktails that are out in the world, but I also want to drink my wine without the alcohol. That's something that really speaks to me. So I'm definitely what I call a substitute drinker. And when I started taking breaks, I of course used my sommelier experience to start educating myself again. And non-alcoholic and zero proof was not like in the like 2020, 2021. That wasn't my first touch with the zero proof world. We in 2015 had a whole spirit free section at Vera. And then I got the opportunity when I was working with a Michelin star restaurant to work with a fantastic beverage team where we worked on and served what would be known as proxies today. And they weren't even called proxies back then, but they were riffs on a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, an Australian Shiraz, and like a sparkling rosé. And no, having that background, I was like, what's happening in the non-alc wine world, and specifically in the de-alcoholized wine world and alternatives,
Yes.
and a
Which is
little bit of
so good now.
yeah, it's so great. The quality is always coming up, and it also is becoming, a default in some situations where people are like, of course we have a sparkling wine or whatever. But the quality had come up, and that was like 2021. I was like, there's an opportunity here to get back to my roots, drink wine, have my work be associated with wine, just sans alcohol now. And that's what happens on the brand side for me at Aldea.
Amazing. Again, like you had this moment of transition that was really focused on like what's healthiest for me,
Mhm.
inside out. And I think a lot of people can, especially women, can relate to it. I know that, like, yeah, honestly, since 30, alcohol has been hitting me differently. It's just, it is not the same. So I've been as well, like finding substitutes and just finding like different ways to relax. As we get into our last few questions, I like to ask, you're someone who loves to wear a lot of hats. You're a hospitality hyphenate yourself, TM. What do you like to do to quote unquote fill your cup since beverages are such a nice part of your rituals?
So I sort of have these three M's. It's meditation, movement, and music. Those are like my three things that definitely help me stay grounded and prioritize health. And on the meditative side of things, it definitely includes beverages because, brewing a pot of tea or making matcha by hand or anything like that, it really is that ritual, right? And it makes you slow down. And I have tea almost every day at 4 o'clock. It's just like something
It's
that I
very
do.
British of you.
It's very British of me. English, Irish, and German. It's like all right there. It's like have
Yes.
tea. Movement is really important. Definitely before we closed the restaurant, when things were not going the best, I found yoga. And I had people telling me all the time, oh, you should meditate. I'm like, my restaurant brain is not going to be able to meditate. I'm here to tell you, I now meditate. Like I found my
Oh,
way
I
to,
love it.
yeah, I found my way
Headspace is my best friend.
and I love it. Calm is mine. So
Yeah.
like, there we go. And so there definitely is something to be said for our mental health and wellness when we can slow down and get grounded. So finding that balance, filling up my cup is meditation, movement, whether it's getting out for a walk, getting in nature, yoga's a big thing. And then music is a magical thing that will always make life better.
Yes. I like how you had the three M's. Sometimes I think of the two M's and a T for myself, which is meditation, medication, and therapy.
Oh, yes. Preach on the therapy. Everyone in
And
the
movement, though.
hospitality industry
Movement, of
should be,
course. Yeah.
everyone in hospitality should be in therapy.
Everyone should be in therapy in general.
Just general should be in therapy for sure. But I love me some alliteration. So that's my style
That's
there.
what worked. I loved it. You've done so much, Liz. What is something that you're most proud of? What do you think you're going to do next? How do you think you're going to continue to grow?
I would say owning and operating a wine bar for almost the same amount of time that the Beatles were a band is
Oh,
definitely
yeah.
something that I'm proud of. But I'm also proud of the fact that what I learned through closing it didn't take me down, right? That I was able to get back to my creative self and really champion sort of this creative hospitality hyphenate for other folks. What's in my journey next? To the fact that I wear a lot of hats, I'm doing so much, but the big thing that I'm focused on right now is education. And that comes from two sides of the work that I do. It's the hyphenate side. It's teaching other hospitality folks how they can build partnerships, build community, build out businesses that they want. That's really important to me. And also on the de-alcoholized wine and non-alc side, I'm doing an educational audit right now for a company, and it's been really exciting. And one of the things that I love to do is teach and coach. And so that's definitely a big focus of 2026.
Can't wait to see. I'm excited to see what happens and where you go next. For any of our founders or aspiring founders listening in, what's your one piece of advice for someone who's looking to become an entrepreneur themselves? So, whether it's in food, wine, hospitality, or anything else.
I say this on almost all podcasts that I'm on, and I say this constantly when I am collaborating with my hyphenates in other markets, but nothing ever comes out fully baked when you are building a business and you're being a solopreneur or whatever it is. When you come out, it's not going to be perfect with whatever you are launching into this world. So, knowing that, just start, right? Like, just get started, just do something, whether it's playing music again, doing something creative, or whatever your passion is. Like, if you want to make bags, like start sewing, right?
Yeah.
It's like just start creating stuff to do those creative push-ups because it's never going to come out fully baked and you're always going to tweak it while it evolves in real time.
Yes. I like the creative push ups because
Creative
we all
push-ups.
get scared, but like, I got to keep working on my own actual push ups too.
And
I'm
also
so bad at
getting
them.
and getting community with folks,
Yeah.
right? Find other folks out there that you think that you align with in your values and your work. And don't be afraid to send a DM. Don't be afraid to
Yes.
send an email. It's okay if people say no to you. It's all right. We all will survive
Absolutely.
rejection. And sooner or later, you're going to find your people. In 2 years of founding Aldea, I continue to find mine.
Yes. Oh, well, I'm so glad to be one of those people. Liz, we're at the world's best and hardest question. So, reminder for folks, this is called the perfect bite because it's a perfect bite. Our friends across the food and beverage and hospitality industries, but also because we all have our own perfect bites. Or in your case, you can also say a sip. So, something you've had that just made you smile that you'll really never forget. So, Liz, what is your perfect bite or sip?
Yeah, I would definitely say that it has to involve tea, right?
Yes.
And probably reaching way back in early childhood memories. My grandmother used to make cinnamon toast, and we would have tea and cinnamon toast together, like the
So
butter and the
simple.
sugar and the cinnamon, like so beautiful. So
Yeah,
I would
so
probably say
comforting.
cinnamon toast and a cup of tea, and your day's going to get right.
Yes. Oh, that's such a perfect combo. I love it. This has been so fun, Liz. Can you let folks know where they can find you? So, talking social accounts, your website, Substack, and anywhere else.
Absolutely. So the main place to get us is aldeahospitality.com. And then you can catch my writing about hospitality and beverage culture over on Substack at the Luncheonette. The Luncheonette is where I like to welcome people into the conversation, much like I used to do when I was behind the bar. So you can find me in those places and don't be shy. Reach out, say hello.
Definitely. Liz, thank you again so much. And thank you all for listening in. This was Liz Mendez's Perfect Bite.
Thanks for tuning in to The Perfect Bite today. You can listen to future episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere else you listen to podcasts. Thanks in advance for subscribing, rating, and reviewing. You can follow The Perfect Bite on social media @PerfectBitePod. Now go get something good to eat.